Marcus Chen had spent 2 years saving for the Tesla. Every penny from his freelance design work, every overtime shift at the marketing firm, every birthday gift converted straight into a high-yield savings account. The moment he drove it home to his modest craftsman-style house in the Riverside neighborhood, he felt something click into place, like the universe had finally acknowledged that hard work meant something. The charging station had cost him an additional $3,000 to install. The electrician had warned him about the neighborhood's aging infrastructure, but Marcus had insisted. He wanted everything perfect, everything secured. His neighbor, Karen Mitchell, lived 2 houses down in a Tudor revival that her real estate agent husband had snagged during the 2008 crash. They'd never spoken beyond the perfunctory wave when hauling groceries. Karen was the type of woman who threw garden parties that lasted until midnight, whose Range Rover always gleamed like it had never touched actual dirt, whose Instagram featured her standing in front of expensive things. The first theft happened on a Thursday night in early October. Marcus noticed it the next morning when his home security system pinged an unusual alert. The charger had been activated at 2:47 a.m. He pulled up the footage, a blurred figure in a dark hoodie, face hidden, checking to make sure no one was watching. The charger showed that approximately 30% of his battery had been drained. Probably an error, he told himself, though his stomach twisted with irritation. He rechecked the security camera footage 3 times. The timestamp was clear. The charger status was irrefutable. It happened again 2 nights later. This time, 40% of his charge was gone. Marcus did the math. California electricity at current rates, times the volume stolen. It added up to roughly $40 per incident. That wasn't the point, though. The point was violation. The point was someone reaching across his property line, taking what was his without asking. He thought about confrontation. Rehearsed it in his head while stuck in traffic on the 405. "Hey, Karen, I noticed someone's been using my charger at night. Was that you?" But the words never quite landed right. Maybe she'd deny it. Maybe she'd gaslight him. "I would never do something like that, Marcus. How dare you accuse me?" He'd seen enough Reddit threads in the neighborhood news group to know how these things usually ended. Accusations, denials, social media warfare, the HOA getting involved, and him looking like the paranoid guy who fought with his neighbor over electricity. By the 4th incident, Marcus had settled into a cold, calculating rage. He'd been wronged, and nothing he could do would be considered proportional. That's when he started planning. He spent a weekend researching. The charger's app interface was sophisticated, programmable, remotely controlled, with detailed logging capabilities. He dug into the manual like he was studying for a state exam. There had to be something. Some way to make this right that didn't involve screaming across a fence at a neighbor who'd made herself unreachable through sheer social confidence. That's when he discovered it. A programmable shock feature. Not dangerous, the reviews had assured him. Merely a static discharge that would startle anyone trying to access an unpermitted connection. It was designed for exactly these situations. Anti-theft, consumer protection. Just a prank, he told himself as he input the code into the charging station's remote settings. Just something to teach her a lesson. He set the parameters carefully. The shock would only activate if someone tried to connect the charger without the app authorization. It wouldn't be enough to cause real harm. The device's safety features prevented that. Just uncomfortable. Just enough to make someone think twice. Just enough to make sure it didn't happen again. That Friday night, Marcus sat in his darkened bedroom at 2:15 a.m., unable to sleep. He heard a car door close on the quiet street. He recognized the sound, Mercedes SUV, distinctive whisper of the engine. His phone buzzed with a notification. The charger was being accessed. He held his breath. 5 seconds passed. 10. Then he heard it, a scream that cut through the night air like a knife, sharp and primal and absolutely genuine. It was followed immediately by a string of words so violent that even Marcus, who'd worked in a marketing firm full of New Yorkers, felt shocked by the sheer creative vulgarity. His heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just a scream. This was rage, wrapped in shock, wrapped in what sounded like genuine physical pain. The Mercedes door slammed. The engine fired. The car peeled away from the curb with an aggressive acceleration that made gravel scatter across the street. Marcus lay back in his bed, breathing hard, and told himself he'd handled it correctly. She wouldn't touch his charger again. The problem was solved. He didn't realize the problem was just beginning. The lawsuit notice arrived 7 days later, certified mail, the kind of envelope that immediately made Marcus's stomach drop into his intestines. He sat at his kitchen counter for a solid 15 minutes, just staring at it, before he had the courage to tear it open. Karen Mitchell was suing him for deliberately inflicting emotional distress, property destruction, assault by electrical device, and negligent endangerment. The amount requested was $15,000. Marcus called his brother first. His brother, an attorney in San Francisco, listened to the whole story in silence before speaking in that tone of barely contained exasperation that older siblings perfect over decades of dealing with younger siblings' problems. You deliberately set a trap, designed to injure someone. It's not designed to injure. It's a static shock. Barely. Did you ask your neighbor before setting this trap? No, but then you deliberately set a trap without her knowledge and activated it when she triggered it. Marcus, that's assault. That's potentially criminal assault. The fact that it was an electrical charge, regardless of how minor, actually makes it worse. Not better. Marcus sat with that for a moment, feeling the architecture of his certainty begin to crack. She was stealing from me. I don't doubt it. And there are legal ways to handle theft. This wasn't one of them. The initial hearing was scheduled for November 15th at the Riverside Superior Court. Marcus hired a defense attorney named David Rothstein, who charged $300 an hour and had a face that looked perpetually disappointed in humanity. Here's the thing, Rothstein said during their first consultation. His office lined with case files and a coffee maker that smelled like it hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. She has physical evidence of injury. Did you see the photos? Marcus had seen them. Karen's lawyer had sent over documentation, a photograph of her hand with an angry red mark across the palm and fingers. It wasn't severe, no blistering, no serious burns, but it was visible. It was real. It existed. That could have been anything, Marcus protested weakly. But you and I both know it wasn't. You set the shock to activate when she grabbed the charger. It worked. She got shocked. You did this deliberately in response to her suspected theft. Rothstein leaned back in his chair. The question is what we can do about it. What they could do about it, as it turned out, was offer a settlement. Rothstein recommended they try to settle for $5,000, an amount that would make the lawsuit go away and keep this from becoming something that would follow Marcus for years. She's going to win anyway, Rothstein said bluntly. You have no legal justification for setting an electrical trap on your property, even if the property is being trespassed upon. California law doesn't permit you to set booby traps. Even if this specific shock is minor, the principle is established case law. But before Marcus could respond to this crushing assessment, something shifted. A news crew showed up at his house on a Friday afternoon. They were from the local station, KTLA, and the reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Stephanie Marks, had a proposition. We want to do a story about neighborhood disputes and DIY justice, she said, standing on his doorstep with a cameraman flanking her. Your case has gotten some traction online. People are divided about whether your reaction was justified. We'd like to tell your side of the story. Marcus's first instinct was to say no. His lawyer would say no. Rational thought screamed no, but something else whispered yes. He'd been made to feel like the villain in his own story. He'd been violated on his own property, repeatedly, by someone who felt entitled enough to think she could simply take what she wanted. And now, the legal system was poised to punish him for trying to protect what was his. So he said yes. The interview aired on Sunday at 5 o'clock. Stephanie had edited it beautifully. Footage of his Tesla, his charger, the police report he'd filed about the theft. Then Marcus on camera, explaining his frustration, his repeated attempts to ignore it, his eventual decision to protect his property. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, he said to the camera, and he meant it. I just wanted my neighbor to stop stealing from me. The story went viral by Monday morning. By Tuesday, Karen's social media accounts had been flooded with thousands of comments. Some were supportive. "You had it coming, Karen!" And equal rights, equal lefts, equal voltage. But plenty were vicious. People traced her to her husband's real estate firm. Someone posted her phone number. Someone else dug up her history. A bitter custody battle from a previous marriage, a lawsuit from a former business partner, a pattern of behavior that the internet collectively determined was consistent with the type of person who would steal electricity from a neighbor. Marcus watched this unfold from his apartment, and he experienced something he hadn't expected, guilt mixed with vindication. He'd wanted Karen to face consequences, sure, but not like this. Not this public execution of her character. That's when his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Is this Marcus Chen?" A woman's voice, professional, controlled, with an undercurrent of something that might have been anger. "Yes? This is Rebecca Chen, Karen Mitchell's attorney. I'm calling to inform you that my client is willing to drop the lawsuit against you entirely. She's also requesting that you make a public statement about the false narrative that's currently circulating about her on social media." Marcus's chest tightened. "What narrative?" "The narrative that she's a habitual thief and a serial liar. The narrative that your appearance on local television has created, which has resulted in harassment of my client that I can only describe as targeted cyberbullying. If you don't correct this narrative publicly within 48 hours, we will be pursuing additional charges related to defamation, harassment, and conspiracy to publicly humiliate my client." The line went dead. Marcus sat in his apartment as the evening light faded, and for the first time he understood that in his quest for justice, he might have opened a door to something far darker than electrical theft. Marcus didn't issue a public statement. He couldn't. Because he realized in the cold clarity of that evening that everything he'd said on camera had been true. He hadn't invented the security footage. He hadn't imagined the charger draining at 2:47 a.m. He hadn't hallucinated Karen's scream cutting through the night. But the internet's version of Karen Mitchell had become something other than the woman who'd stolen electricity from him. She'd become a symbol, a punchline, a cautionary tale, a villain in a story where Marcus was the hero. And he'd lit that fire. It was his brother who suggested hiring a private investigator, not to dig up more dirt on Karen, but to establish a complete timeline of everything that had happened. "If she's going to threaten you with a defamation suit," his brother reasoned, "we need to document that every statement you made was factually accurate." The investigator, a woman named Patricia Valdez who specialized in digital forensics, took the case. What she found in the first 72 hours changed everything. The charger was accessed 4 times between September 28th and October 14th, she reported. Sitting across from Marcus in Rothstein's office, her laptop open to spreadsheets of data. But it wasn't accessed by Karen Mitchell. Marcus felt the room tilt. The access points came from a different location each time. The charger's logs show separate app access credentials being used, not the ones you have, but ones that were generated separately. That's not a manual connection like someone physically grabbing the charger. That's someone accessing your charger remotely through the app. "That's not possible," Marcus said. "I have a password." "You do now. But someone with basic technical knowledge could have reset your credentials using the manufacturer's default access points. It happens more often than you'd think. People don't update their firmware. The security's weak. It's relatively simple if you know what you're doing." Rothstein leaned forward. "So someone hacked the charger remotely, multiple times, from different locations?" "Or one person doing it from different locations," Valdez corrected. "But here's what's interesting. I cross-referenced the IP addresses with known location data. 3 of the 4 accesses came from the same area, the Riverside Business Park, specifically from the office building where Marcus's marketing firm is located." The room went very quiet. "Someone from my office," Marcus whispered. "Or someone accessing the network from your office," Valdez said. "I'd need to subpoena your firm's IT logs to narrow it down further, but yes, the charger wasn't being manually stolen from. It was being hacked remotely by someone with access to your company's network or someone in the vicinity of that network." Marcus thought about his colleagues, thought about the people he worked with, the junior designers, the account managers, The creative director who'd been passed over for a promotion that Marcus had gotten last spring. I accused her, Marcus said quietly. I set a trap based on my assumption, and I accused her publicly. Valdez exchanged a look with Rothstein. There's more. I looked into the scream you heard when you activated the shock feature. The night of October 19th, your security camera has audio. I enhanced it, and there's a secondary sound buried in the recording, a vehicle door closing, but in a direction that doesn't match Karen's Mercedes SUV. The sound patterns indicate a different model, smaller, lighter. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't think Karen was the one who touched the charger that night. It took 3 more days for the investigator to narrow down the vehicle type and cross-reference it with parking permit data from the residential area. The car belonged to Jason Harmon, Marcus's direct supervisor at the marketing firm. Marcus sat with that information for an entire afternoon before he called Harmon to set up a meeting. He didn't mention the investigation. He didn't hint at accusation. He simply asked if Harmon wanted to grab coffee after work. Sure thing, buddy, Harmon had said in that easy, casual tone that suddenly seemed sinister in retrospect. Always down for some coffee with a colleague. They met at a cafe on the corner of Colorado and 3rd, the kind of place where young professionals congregated and no one was truly private. Harmon arrived wearing the same designer button-up he'd worn to the office, his hair styled with the kind of precision that suggested he'd spent time in front of a mirror that morning. So, Harmon said, wrapping his hands around a cappuccino that probably cost more than a car payment. What's up? Feel like you never just hang out anymore since you got bumped up to senior designer. This was the thing about Jason Harmon. He was charming, genuinely charming, the kind of man who could make an insult sound like a compliment if he wanted to. I wanted to ask you something, Marcus said carefully, and I want you to know that I already have proof of what I'm about to ask about, so I'm hoping you'll just tell me the truth. Harmon's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw something flicker behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe? Or the moment an actor realized the audience had figured out he wasn't actually a hero. I hacked my EV charger. Marcus continued quietly. Someone accessed it remotely 4 times in the first 2 weeks of October. Someone using IP addresses that trace back to our office building. Harmon took a long sip of his cappuccino. When he set the cup down, he did it slowly, deliberately, like he was buying time. Okay, he said finally. Yes, I did it. The confession was so anticlimactic that Marcus almost missed it. He'd prepared for denial, for argumentation, for Harmon to turn the tables somehow. But instead there was just admission. Why? Marcus asked. Because you got the promotion, Harmon said, and now there was an edge to his voice, a rawness that hadn't been there before. I've been at that firm for 6 years, Marcus. 6 years. I brought in the Mitchell account. Remember that? That was me. I worked the pitch. I coordinated the entire media strategy that got them to sign. And then you came in, fresh out of your little side gig designing logos, and suddenly you're the golden boy. Suddenly, you're the one getting the raise, the corner office, the senior title. Jason! I wanted to prove you didn't deserve it, Harmon interrupted. I wanted to prove that you were paranoid, that you were making poor decisions, that you would jump to conclusions and blame innocent people. I was going to let you destroy your own reputation. Then maybe they'd see that you weren't actually as smart as they thought you were. Marcus stared at his former mentor, because that's what Harmon had been, a mentor figure when he'd first started at the firm and felt something inside him crack. So you let me blame my neighbor. Your neighbor started your car, Harmon said. I mean, I saw her physically going to your charger on October 19th. I was actually going to text you about it, but then I thought, why not just let this play out? But then I panicked and I left town for the weekend. And when I came back, you'd already done the whole news interview. And she was getting destroyed online, and I realized I'd actually created a monster. You created a monster? Marcus felt something like rage rising in his chest. I created the monster. I set an electrical trap. I put on TV and told the world that she was a thief. Yeah, but she kind of is, though, Harmon said, and the casual cruelty of it was somehow worse than the premeditation. I mean, I saw her hands on the charger. Maybe I started it, but she's the one who kept going for it even after you supposedly told her to stop. I never told her anything. I didn't even know for sure it was her." Harmon leaned back in his chair, and his expression shifted into something that looked almost like sympathy. But it wasn't. It was pity. "Look," he said, "this is all very dramatic, but at the end of the day, you're still the guy who set an electrical trap on his property. I might have given you the push, but you're the one who followed through. You're the one who got on TV. You're the one who burned her reputation to cinders in front of thousands of strangers. If you want to blame me for that, fine. But you could have done the right thing at any point, and didn't." Marcus sat with that for a long moment, then gathered his things and left the cafe without another word. The next morning, Marcus's lawyer sent a letter to Karen Mitchell's attorney, a full retraction of the public statements, a complete narrative explaining what had actually happened, and an offer of settlement in the amount of $25,000 with the explicit condition that Karen would not discuss the settlement terms publicly, not out of pride, but to protect her privacy. To his surprise, Karen accepted the settlement within 24 hours. Then the email arrived. The subject line simply read, "Thank you. Marcus, I'm not going to pretend this didn't destroy something in me. I've been called a thief, a liar, a trespasser. My husband has barely spoken to me in a week. My children asked me if I was really a bad person after their friends told them what they'd read online. The garden club revoked my membership, which honestly might be the one silver lining, but I wanted you to know that I understand what happened. Not the part where you set the trap. I'm still furious about that, and my hand still hurts where I grabbed the charger. The part where you felt violated, assumed the worst, and decided to protect yourself the only way you knew how. I did it too, you know. Not the charger thing, but I've been stealing. Just not electricity. Stealing small things from the building materials store where I volunteer. Pens mostly. Some notebooks. Small pieces of copper wire. It's been going on for almost 2 years. I told my therapist it was about reclaiming some sense of control after my divorce. But honestly, I think it was just about the thrill of taking something without being caught. I'm not innocent in this situation, Marcus. I'm just innocent of what you accused me of. I've decided to turn myself into the store's management and make restitution. It's going to be humiliating, and it should be. I deserved better than what the internet did to me. But I also deserved better than what I was doing to myself. One thing, though, what you did to that man at your firm, your supervisor or coworker or whoever he is, that's not going to end well. I can tell from the tone of your lawyer's letter that you're angry. That anger is going to make you do something, and I'm asking you not to, because this has already cost us both enough. Take care of yourself." Karen Marcus read the email 3 times. The 3rd time, he let himself cry, just for a moment, in his car before driving to work. He didn't report Jason Harmon to HR. He didn't go to the police. What he did do was schedule a meeting with his firm's principal and bring Patricia Valdez's report. He laid out the facts without embellishment. Harmon had deliberately hacked his personal charger to create conflict. Harmon had manipulated the situation to sabotage a colleague. Harmon had demonstrated a deliberate pattern of dishonesty and unethical behavior. He asked that Harmon be terminated. The firm's principal, a woman named Sandra Yamamoto who'd built the company from nothing, listened to the entire presentation in silence. When Marcus finished, she didn't immediately respond. Instead, she pulled up her email and started typing. The termination letter was sent to Jason Harmon that afternoon. He was given 2 weeks' severance and a request to leave the building immediately. Marcus watched from across the office as Harmon packed his personal items into a cardboard box. Their eyes met for just a moment, and in that moment, Marcus saw the calculation happening behind Harmon's eyes, the moment where he was deciding whether this was the end of the conflict or the beginning of something else. Harmon left without looking back. 3 weeks later, Marcus received a notice from his homeowners association. A formal complaint had been filed regarding the installation of an electrical device that could endanger residents. The charging station would need to be removed or significantly modified to comply with neighborhood safety codes. He scheduled the electrician to remove the shock feature and recalibrate the charger to standard settings. The same week, Karen Mitchell's volunteer position at the building materials store was publicly suspended pending an investigation into missing inventory. The story made the local news. Woman who was falsely accused of EV charger. Theft. Confesses to years-long theft ring at community organization. The irony was so complete that Marcus almost laughed when he read it. What happened to Jason Harmon was harder to track. Marcus learned through LinkedIn that Harmon had gotten a job at another marketing firm 2 weeks after his termination, this one in Los Angeles. The new company hadn't done any background investigation, apparently, or if they hadn't cared about the circumstances of his departure. Marcus wanted to care about that. He wanted to feel like justice hadn't been served, that the villain was walking free. But he'd learned something through this entire ordeal. Justice and victory were not the same thing. He sent Karen a letter in the mail, actual paper, old-fashioned, addressed by hand. In it, he didn't apologize for setting the trap. They both knew that situation was more complicated than simple apologies could encompass. Instead, he simply wrote, "I hope you're doing okay. I know this has been a difficult time for both of us. If you need any character references or support with your situation at the volunteer organization, please let me know. I meant what I said in the retraction. I made assumptions that were wrong, and I acted on those assumptions in a way that had consequences I didn't intend. I can't undo what happened. But I can acknowledge that I was part of what happened. I hope things get better for you, Marcus." He mailed it on a Thursday and didn't expect a response. The response came anyway, 6 days later. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive, addressed in careful handwriting. "Marcus, thank you for that letter. Your therapist called me, which is apparently something she can do now that I've given written consent. She told me that you've started seeing someone too, trying to understand why you escalated the situation the way you did. I respect that. The volunteer organization is doing a full audit. I cooperated fully, and I've already made restitution for what I took. The irony is that I was going to be asked to step back anyway because someone did come forward about my behavior. I made it easier for everyone by confessing preemptively. The garden club reinstated my membership, which I found genuinely surprising. Apparently, the secretary felt that public humiliation constituted sufficient penance. My children have mostly stopped asking about it, though I think they'll remember that their mother was internet famous for a very stupid reason for the rest of their lives. I've also started looking at how my need for control manifested through theft. It's not a comfortable thing to examine about yourself, but it's necessary. Apparently, I'd been feeling powerless in my own life for so long that taking small things was the only way I could feel like I had agency. Your supervisor, Harmon, he called me last week." He wanted to apologize. I didn't accept it, and I told him that if he ever contacted me again, I would pursue legal action. I wanted to tell you that, so you knew I wasn't going to let him pretend this was all a misunderstanding. I think what we both needed was to stop being victims and start being responsible for our own behavior. You did that. I'm trying to. Maybe one day we can be actual neighbors without all of this. I'd be okay with that. Karen. Marcus kept both letters in a drawer in his bedside table. He didn't reread them often. It was too painful, too complicated. But he knew they were there. The charging station stayed in his driveway, functional and standard issue and anonymous. He never had another issue with someone trying to access it, partly because word got around the neighborhood about what had happened, and partly because Marcus had learned something crucial. The worst traps aren't the ones you set for other people. They're the ones you set for yourself. One evening, about 2 months after everything had settled into a new and quieter normal, Marcus was getting into his Tesla when he noticed Karen retrieving her garbage cans from the curb. Their eyes met across the space of 2 properties, and for a moment, neither moved. Then Karen nodded, just a small acknowledgement, and Marcus nodded back. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They'd said everything that needed, saying in letters and in legal documents and in the terrible clarity of people who'd done the wrong things. For what felt like the right reasons, Marcus got in his car and drove to work, and Karen finished gathering her garbage cans. And the neighborhood moved forward the way neighborhoods do, not forgetting but accepting. Not forgiving exactly, but reaching some kind of exhausted peace with the fact that people are complicated and sometimes the person you think is your enemy is really just another person trying to survive their own life.